This segment is going to cover the formation of squares. And by definition, a square is simply an all-round, all-facing type formation. And I've got some examples out here. How the players actually form the units of squares on the tabletop is really to their convenience. The key thing is it needs to be as dense as possible, occupying the least amount of space, and be somewhat reflective of an all-round type defense. So try and have the figures pointing in at least 2 directions as a minimum, and preferably as 3 or 4 directions if possible. Now I've got a couple examples here just to show you what they look like. We start off with some real simple ones here. This is a 2-figure square. Basically it's 2 figures back to back. This is a 3-figure square, sort of like in a triangle type thing where you can have them back to back, same methodology. This is a 4-figure square. Again, as you can see, the figures are trying to show themselves in all directions. Moving on across up the scale here, we have 5 figures and 6-figure squares. This being a 5-figure square, and this being a 6-figure square, representative of the Austrian and the French armies. In the back row, we have a 7-figure square, happens to be a Prussian line battalion. We got an 8-figure square, Austrian here, and we have a 9-figure square. And again, if you have a 10-figure square or 11-figure, in theory, if you have such a big unit, just put the figures in all-round type facing. That's the key to the thing, key to the game, shall we say. Just have the figures formed in a way that somewhat looks like a square and be as dense as possible. Now there's a couple other formations which are national characteristic type formations, and I'll cover those in a moment. There are some national characteristic formations which sort of act like pseudo-squares. They are the Austrian battalion mass formation and the English 4-rank formation. The Austrian battalion mass A is a formation which is going to have at least 3 figures or 3 ranks of figures to be declared a battalion mass formation. It should be as close to a proper column as possible also. So with this example, a 3x3 would meet both definitions. A proper column, and B, at least 3 ranks in formation. This is another example of it here. And the advantage of being in a battalion mass formation is if enemy cavalry impacts from the front, the forward edge is considered a square formation when doing the results of shock combat, cavalry versus infantry. If cavalry impacts on the flank or the rear, it is not considered a square formation. It is to defend like a typical column would in the flank, i.e. with 2 figures. So the advantage of the Austrians forming a battalion mass is they can march across the battlefield at a columnar movement rate and have a safety fact of being a square in the front if they're hit by cavalry, and they get a slight morale bonus in regards to try and maintain themselves in a state of a charge. It's not as good as being in a square, where a square never takes a morale check for charging cavalry. A battalion mass will, but the battalion mass has modifiers to enable the unit to maintain a good order. The English 4-rank line basically operates in the same method. Is considered a square if impacted in the front, just like I showed earlier. If impacted in the side, it is not considered a square. The English 4-rank line is as how it is described. It is going to be in a formation which typically would not be a proper column, but it has to have at least 2 ranks of figures and filled as to the best of the ability for even ranks. If, for instance, if you had an odd number, you can have 1 figure being odd in the back, i.e. a 4-3 combination, but you could not do a 4-rank line with a 4-2. You would have to take one of these figures and put it back like this to maintain the evenness of the ranks. Again, just like the Austrians, they get advantages when they're impacted or facing charging cavalry in the front. And last but least, just as a sidebar, the Ottoman army is always going to be based in a double or massed formation as a minimum. It cannot form a single rank line. The exceptions to this would be their special European trained units, which are far and few in number. The vast majority of the Ottoman army will always have their figures based in double rank lines like this. This is not the same as an English 4-rank formation or an Austrian battalion massé. They receive no benefits if they're impacted by cavalry in the front.